All right.
Perfect. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our series. We call it, it's the Better Living for easier way to live for an enjoyable future. So we're glad that you're all here today. My name is Paige Fairbanks-Gunn, and I work for Koelsch Communities. We are senior living. We have independent living, assisted, and also memory care. I've been in the industry about 25 years, and we have communities all across the country in 8 states, and I'm in the Arizona region. And Pam and I have worked together for the last going on 4 years, ever since COVID. So we work closely together and partner and collaborate, and we're just happy to have you here today, Pam. And you're also an author. So tell me about the story about the cover of your book.
So welcome, everyone. I'm Pam Ostrowski. I'm the founder of Alzheimer's Family Consulting, and I work with all adult children and spouses who have loved ones with some sort of cognitive impairment or anticipating cognitive impairment progression. And so I wrote the book. It's Not That Simple, Helping Families Navigate the Alzheimer's Journey. And I get this question a lot. So thank you, Paige, for asking. But people have asked, why is there a compass? Why are there trees? Why is there a path? And who are these people, and why is the guy, why is this person in a wheelchair? And my mom was in a wheelchair, so it's kind of a tribute to her for the last 5 years of her life. And sometimes when you have cognitive impairment, Alzheimer's in particular, it can change your movement and stability. So the path is actually the journey that is taken as part of the multi-year journey, right? So those of you who are on here that have someone with dementia in your life, you know that it's multi-year, that my journey was 14 years. And then more importantly, this is what Paige and I are. We're the compass. We're pointing you to true north to help you with wherever you are on that path. And, trying to get through that scary, dark forest and have hope and understanding and have the comprehension and the ability to get through this and be okay with it, to not have regret and don't feel guilt and don't feel sad, but instead to look at things from a different mindset and from a different perspective. So that's what we try to do in these sessions, as well as professionally outside of them. So just wanted to thanks for asking that. I hear it a lot, but I haven't talked to this group about it. So, all right. So we are here today to talk about what's really the reason why our parents don't want to talk about later in life living. So we added the word really because a lot of times adult children think that, oh, they're just being stubborn. My mom and dad are just being stubborn about changing, downsizing from their 3,000 square foot home. And, you might be right. But Paige and I deal with and talk with people every day about this particular topic. And we have some insights we'd like to share with you. So Paige, what's your first real reason for why aging individuals hesitate to talk about, well, what is my later in life plan? And by the way, if you're an adult child of someone in their 80s, this conversation is about you and your loved one, not just well, this is my parents' conversation. It's like, yeah, if you're in your late 50s, early 60s, what's your later in life plan? So Paige, what do you have? What do you hear the most for a real reason for not moving?
The most that I hear, it's not that they don't want to think about it, because they are thinking about it. They are. But the biggest thing is they're overwhelmed and don't know how to move forward about having basically the logistics of everything. It's overwhelming. And Pam, you and I spoke yesterday, and I talked to my aunt yesterday. My aunt's name is Pam. And here's a prime example. My aunt is 75. She's coming here next week from Kansas. She's my only relative left in Kansas. And we're going through this with her. So she says, I'm taking a big leap because we're going to pick out an apartment the following Saturday, and she's going to be moving into an independent living community. And She downsized about 10 years ago. And this is so overwhelming for her. And she's like, how is this all going to work? And I said, you know what, Pam, we've got movers. We've got a realtor in Kansas for you. We've got, the downsizing. We've got shoppers. We have everything. So I have to help her on both sides because she's moving out. She's
Right.
moving out of state.
Yeah.
So I've got to help her from a distance, but it's the overwhelming part of just change and the logistics of everything. And like I said, she's already downsized into a 1,500 square foot home 10 years ago. So she's just overwhelmed with that, which is she's already made the first step. But if you can imagine a 3,000 square foot home, and what if you've been there for 40 years? I can't imagine what is in every drawer and closet in your house. That just, to me, is overwhelming. And I'm not moving.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I just did that, right? I just moved from Arizona to Colorado.
Yes,
and
you just went through it.
And you just open a cabinet and you're like, really? There's more stuff. And I'm not a hoarder. I don't have a ton of stuff. But when you start packing, you realize like I probably have 60 or 70 boxes put in storage.
Yes.
And it's crazy. So then the question is, all right, I've got someone who's not willing to say that it's overwhelming. How do we get them across that hump, so to speak, that mindset of it's just too much. I don't want to deal with it.
It's just too much. Well, that's where the solution comes in about our network of people and resources, supportive services to help them. And Pam and I really try to customize. There are so many business opportunities. I mean, these are people that this is their business. This is what they do. So
Right.
you can have as little help and as much as we just want you to take care of everything. To the moving, to the packing, to the estate sale, to putting your home on the market. And you can of course give your input if you've got a certain realtor, but they'll work with you on everything. It's basically customized resources for you to help with all of these logistics. It's phenomenal. We have some wonderful, what we call right sizing little helpers that come in, and they literally come in, and I call them angels. They just come in and they just take care of everything. And it is so worth the percentage that they get, and it's worth it. It is totally worth it. It gives you less stress, and you get to walk into your new place and everything is put together, and it's stress-free.
Well, and that's the thing that I had to go through with my parents, because my dad actually wrote a 7-page letter to my siblings and to me, and said, when we're ready, we'll have this conversation. But we've got to sort through our clothes and our belongings. And I had already thrown away a lot of nuts and bolts and things that my dad had accumulated over decades. And so when they were in that situation, I was like, okay, Dad, tell you what, I'm going to help. And I kind of became that person. I found the realtor and I did all those things, but because he was more comfortable with talking with me about, well, no, I don't really want that, or I want this, or I keep this, but I don't like this. And then, the beauty of having a professional though, instead of a family member, is one, no resentment. You threw out, boy, I can't tell you how many times I heard that. You threw out this. Where's my whatever? And I'm like, I don't know. It's here somewhere, maybe. And so yeah, whoops. And so, being able to have a professional come in, they have detachment and they become your loved one's friend, in the case of parents, they kind of become the friend that's like, you know what, I understand, but wouldn't it be better for us to just take a photo of this and maybe frame it? And then it doesn't take up as much space. And, and I moved some stuff that belonged to my mom, that belonged to her sisters. I mean, I've got some definite things that I kept, but I always asked myself in this last move, is it bringing me joy? Is it something that I liked? And I found stuff that my mom didn't even use that she was given. And I was like, well, why am I keeping it? So having a professional ask your loved ones these questions is so much easier than you doing it yourself. And that's true of caregiving. It's true of prepping for a move. It's true of so many of this later in life planning is what I call it. This later in life planning journey. When you're thinking about this, you have to think about, well, what are we going to do with this stuff? How important is it really to us? Or does it just look pretty in a cabinet? So to this question point, when I think about what the top reason is, why parents in particular, but maybe spouses too, to keep it close to the vest, is because they don't want to be a burden. I know my mom knew that she was struggling with her cognitive capabilities. And my dad didn't see it because this was the love of his life and he didn't want to see it. So he didn't. He just said, she's just, getting older. We were both getting older and, just kind of putting a lot of excuses out there. And she didn't want to be a burden. And she would not have told me anything. I just basically through observation realized what was happening. And so parents in particular, but even spouses don't want to be a bother. They don't want to be a burden. They would rather sit still in a chair and not do anything, which is terrible for the brain, than to actually say, could you help me make dinner? Could you help me find my keys? Could you help me take a shower? Or tell me where the soap is, or where's the shampoo? But instead, they're afraid of being a burden or being a bother. And that dynamic is so detrimental to both parties in the relationship that I actually see that as the number one reason too. Is it's overwhelming, but it's also, oh, we don't want to start talking about this because then the kids are going to step in and then there's always one sibling, that would be me, who will take over, right? And your parents are scared to death that, oh geez, Pam's going to come in and it's going to be like a tornado. Whereas, if they invited my brother, he and his wife would sit down and be very calm and go through things slowly. And I'm like, no, we got a train to catch here. Let's just keep it moving. And so you have to pick the kid that's the adult child that is probably the one that matches with the personalities of the parents the best. So that helps with that sense of burden. At least that should be the sibling or the adult child that talks with the parents first, because there's that fear factor of, oh, I just talked with one of my colleagues and she's one of 7 kids and the mom is not doing well. She's having some failing health issues. And she's like, well, thank goodness we have 7 because everybody comes in and steps up. And I'm like, I can't imagine what your mother thinks of having all 7 of you in her house. So a big deal. So what other questions do we have?
Can I just chime in just a little bit?
Yes, please.
I like I said, I was talking to my aunt and I've had this conversation with my dad who's passed on, but there's one thing that my aunt and I have a clear understanding about because she's going to be moving out here and this is about 2 years ago. And she said, if I don't want to burden you. And I said, you're actually burdening me by not moving out here. Because, I'm never moving back to Kansas. I love visiting, but I'm never going back there. So you're actually burdening by not moving closer to me. And then she's like, okay, now I understand. So I do have to, I want to make the move, but now that makes me feel better that I'm not burdening you by you. I'm helping you and us by moving. So it's a burden if you don't.
Right. And that I'm glad you brought that up because my dad said the same thing. So did my mom. And this is when they were in New Hampshire and I was in Phoenix, right? So we're talking 2,800 miles. And I said, look, I worry about you every single day.
Yep.
So if you're worried about me worrying about you, which is kind of funny,
it's happening.
then we need to do something to get us closer together. And again, just like you, I'm not moving back to New Hampshire. Shovel sunshine, shovel snow. I'm going with the sunshine. And so they, I said, we need to figure this out. The boys have other things going on. They're not going to step up here. And you're in an environment that's not physically safe for you with snow and ice and weather. So yeah, exactly. It's having that conversation. But I can almost tell you, if you're an adult child, you can assume that your loved one is thinking, I don't want to be a burden. So we're not going to have this conversation because the conversation is perceived as a burden, right? They're thinking, exactly. If I have this conversation with you and I tell you that I don't want to be a burden, then all of a sudden I'm a burden, it's like it's part of the deal and the definition. And exactly. So you got to have the conversation. And again, this is what I do is help people have conversations like this. So, you know, that's, if you have this kind of situation, let us know. Okay. Next up, what's another, what else have we got going here, Paige?
Okay, so let's see here.
I think we're going to talk about spouses.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about spouses, but we've also got to talk about we've got the money situation too.
Well, yep. Why don't we talk about, you know, a bit about the spouses first. So one of the things that I've seen, and frankly, I don't know how old all of you are on the call or watching the recording, but I have noticed that people 60 and over they're more fearful. Yes, your world opens up when you retire, or, you know, whatever you choose to do, you know, volunteering or philanthropy. But when you stop and you realize, you know, I'm on the second part of this journey. I'm, you know, things are scary. And having that fear of, I don't know what's going to happen to me health-wise. I just bought a tri-level house, right? So there's stairs up to the bedrooms and stairs down to the family room, and then there's a living space. So 3 levels. And everybody said, well, you've always lived in a single level home. Why are you getting stairs at this age? And I was like,
Right.
why? You know, and I'm like, because I'm reacting like I'm 40. And so they're like, you know, won't you worry about stairs? And I said, frankly, to me, there's only 5 or 6. That's really good for my quads and my hamstrings, for my stability and keeping me working out while I'm at home. So I don't have to drive to a gym. I can use those as tools. And they're like, okay, we'll see. So it's one of those things as we get older, we're afraid, we become more cautious about how we're going to live our life moving forward. What do those next 10 years look like? And I believe that it's about what's your belief about your next 10 years. Mm-hmm. So is it, well, I'm going to get decrepit, my knees are going to be an issue, you know, I'm going to gain weight because everybody gains weight, all these generalizations that really aren't true. They're choices. And so I would actually ask you, and you can apply this to anything, is the thing you fear real? Like, you know, if you've fallen downstairs before, is there a chance that you will fall down the stairs again? Okay, so that's real. However, if you anticipate aging being not a good thing, and then you live in fear. And so what can you do to challenge that belief? Because we all have a mindset of whatever our beliefs are. And it doesn't matter who you are in that person's life, they're going to believe what they believe until they themselves question it. So I want to make sure that you guys ask yourselves that question. Is the thought that I'm having real? Is it actually factual? Or is it just a belief I've had for years and years and years, and therefore it's comfortable? So I think people looking at later in life living, like our favorite thing, hey, this is a really nice home. You had those people come out and go to the fine dining at the independent living.
Yes.
And they said, what a beautiful home this is. And you're like, right. What?
And I'm like, this is not a home.
No.
Because they were referring to nursing home.
Yeah.
And I said,
that's skilled nursing. This is independent living. You have your own apartment, you have your car, you have vacations, you have everything. So that actually, having everything brings us to that financial thing that you brought up. Do you want to talk more about the fear of
the fear of, you know, a lot of people, again, it's, you know, oh my gosh, I can't afford that. You know, what is this going to cost me? And, you know, we pulled some numbers, and if you are living in your own home now, I'm approaching, in a couple of years, I'll be 50. So I still I have a mortgage. I don't have my house paid off yet, but if you don't have your house paid off, you have a mortgage. The average cost of living in Arizona monthly is running in between about $4,000 to $5,000 a month.
And what
So
all does that include? That includes
right.
mortgage.
That includes your mortgage, your home, your taxes, of course.
Yeah.
Your home insurance is going to be bundled into that.
Yeah.
But you're not going to be getting, what about all the appliances that break down?
Yeah. Anybody got AC in Arizona?
Yeah,
So
my husband works in air conditioning sales in Arizona, and pre-pandemic 2020, 2019, a 5-ton unit cost $8,000. Now they cost 15. That's crazy expensive. So if you have a large appliance, your air conditioning goes down, you've got
hot water heater, furnace,
your appliances, all of that stuff, because everything's made to break. Unfortunately, that's just what we live in. And so that's going to be additional cost. What about your landscaping? In Arizona, you have most everybody, 80% of us have a pool. We have scorpions and termites, so your pest control, and there's pests everywhere, no matter what state you're in. So all of those additional things, your of course your utilities,
irrigation systems, sprinklers, water
softener, all of those things. And of course that doesn't include your food, doesn't include weekly housekeeping. And those are all things that laundry. Yeah. I mean, those are all things that are included in a senior living independent community. And needless to say, also availability for transportation within a 10-mile radius. That's all covered for you. And the social setting. There's studies, and there's a lot more studies coming out too, that loneliness causes dementia.
Right. Isolation,
exactly. Yeah. Isolation and being lonely can cause dementia. So having a social setting, and even if you're not a huge social person, but at least you've got smaller things and availability for some social setting for you to be
or
in.
stimulation. So a lot of people, like, I'm not a social person. I know the people who know me are like, no way, you're an extrovert. No, I'm an introvert. I am willing to sit and watch and observe and listen, but I'm less likely to engage. And that type of stimulation is good for the brain. But sitting in isolation, I know so many of my clients' parents sit in front of the TV and just watch TV. And that is one of the worst things you can do. And there's so many things that they're finding out, to your point about research: isolation, depression, which is the loneliness factor, depression, deafness is also a contributor. And then, of course, Alzheimer's is also considered type 3 diabetes, right? So a lot of people, a lot more of our population is suffering from high blood sugar. And so we have all of these different factors. And Paige, I sent you a link to this article about the fact that people who live in senior independent communities or assisted live longer as a result of having access to whatever services they need, whether that's dining, laundry, housekeeping, stimulation, being able to, I don't know about you guys, but I would love to play ping pong or pool, but I'm not going to buy a ping pong table or a pool table and try to find a space for it in my house. So, but when you live in a grand living environment where you're independent and can tootle around and do whatever you want, and, to your point about transportation, that's something my dad, he had a car, but I'm like, why don't we leverage the transportation to go to Walgreens? And these types of things are good for the human brain and the body, and honestly, your quality of life. Like, it's a Dutch luxury cruise liner. So many things. Tell them about, now that we're on this path, tell them about the group that's going to the travel groups where they're going.
Yeah, we have a travel club. So one of our communities, they're planning a Sedona trip. And then our community in Surprise, they're planning a trip to Kona, to Hawaii. So the active, the lifestyle director meets with our residents and guests, and, they sit down and have a powwow on where they want to go next. And it happens, my in-laws live, in a community, not in a community, but they live in a neighborhood, and they all have to rally one another and orchestrate to get together to figure out to do a trip. Whereas we have a director that does all that. They coordinate it all, get it all ready to go so they can just enjoy their life. And the social aspect of it is huge. Like you said, people live longer, they live healthier, happier lives. And a lot of people think that the stigma is, oh my gosh, I have to be wealthy to be able to live in a community. That is so far untrue. People look at, when you put the expenses down and you really do the numbers, it is doable. It is. My aunt is not a wealthy person, but her income and her Social Security, she's going to be able to do it. And it makes sense for her.
Right.
And so that's why she's going to do it. And she's very excited. She's nervous, but I'm going to pull out the nervousness and the anxiety, hopefully, for her and help her along the way. So, but the social aspect of it is huge.
Well, and it's natural to feel anxious when you move, right? Because again, we're back to fear of unknown. And so to kind of, pull out, because we went deep dive on exciting things that, about this quality of life that senior living communities, and by the way, I wanted to qualify this. Senior living communities, I lived in a 55 and over community. That's a senior living community, right? It's a 55 and over active community. And then progressing then to say, you know what, I don't want to have a condo anymore. I don't want to have, I would rather live in an apartment where I can step out my door, walk down, grab a bagel or lunch, and not have to get in the car, or not have to fire up the stove, open the refrigerator doors and say, all right, I need to go grocery shopping now. I can't have lunch because I have to go do this. And so the fact that all of this is so handy is part of this quality of life conversation that Paige and I try to emphasize, is that it's nothing to be afraid of. Yeah, it's natural to have anxiety about a change. Change is hard for most people, but being able to have this conversation with your loved one and say, I get it. So the things to remember are validate their feelings when you're having a conversation. It's like, I get it. You know what? But wouldn't it be better? Why don't we go look? And wouldn't it be better if we start researching now and take a look now? And then if it doesn't look like it's a fit, that's fine, but it's about starting early. Sooner is smarter is one of my favorite phrases. And being able to understand, especially if you have a parent or a spouse who's in their 70s or older, they're used to when they went to the nursing home and saw their grandparents in a medical environment where there were a bunch of nurses in white suits, white outfits, and were swarming around, and they were in a medical bed, and it was very clinical environment. And it's really important, especially for having this conversation, that you get out and go look and really make sure that you're using a placement agent who's a professional, not somebody who just says, hey, I used to be a realtor, now I'm a placement agent. Look for someone with a passer's qualification so that they can tell you, look, these are different communities based on, budget and services. Let's do the math and sit down and do that. Your comparison of your expenses versus these other options. Those are the kinds of conversations that you can have prior to worrying about actually making the move, right? Because making the move, then that's when we get into the overwhelm and this is too hard. And, there's a lot of different ways to get around that. So,
and I always tell families, just, the fear of the unknown to me is not knowing. So, if you're looking at a 10-year plan, say you're 70 and you're like, I'm 70, I'm going to be 80 in 10 years. Why not just pop in and go take a look? It doesn't mean you're moving in. It doesn't mean you're moving tomorrow or the next year. It could be maybe 5 years down the road, but at least you're getting an idea
Yeah.
of what they look like. And I get so many people that come into our communities and they're like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that this is a senior living community, you know,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
fine dining. And, we've got a bistro and the social setting and, the beautiful building,
Right.
and all the fun stuff to do in it. So
Right.
I sooner is smarter, and why not? It's not going to hurt you by popping into a community or two or
Right.
three.
Right. And you could go for lunch or dinner or whatever. So
Absolutely.
Gail has an interesting question, and we hear this a lot. So her mom is having issues with cognitive decline, or a family member, I should say. And they're looking into assisted living, which is what you would want to do.
Yep.
You start out with assisted living. If there's any cognitive impairment, they're going to want to get to know your loved one sooner, right? Because if she thinks it's going to be hard moving now, it's going to be a lot worse down the line. So now is the time to move her, so that both the caregivers and the staff get to know her and her needs and her likes and her dislikes. And that way she can then integrate. Now, here's the thing, Gail. When she moves, and I've seen this with my mom, who, by the way, lost her words 8 years before she passed, meaning she had no conversations, no sentences. She got better every time. I moved her twice, once from one place to another. But both times she got better because she had stimulation, she had engagement, she had attention. Part of the problem, and what we as adult children don't recognize, is you're killing them by leaving them where they're at.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds severe, but it's worse for them to stay where they are than to move in and get better. So the fear, again, you have a belief that, oh, she's just going to get worse and worse and worse. Especially with dementia, it's a roller coaster. It's going to get better, it's going to get worse. And actually, we have people on this call who have watched their loved one go from not remembering how to button their pants to totally socializing, having conversations, and following the conversation. I have several clients whose parents have been through that experience. Because of the stimulation, they got better. So it's an unreasonable fear, an unreasonable expectation to say that she's by default going to get worse. If you leave her where she is, I can pretty much guarantee if he or she is living alone, that they will get worse. So now comes the financial question. I'm going to hand it off to you, Paige, because it's a hot potato.
Yeah. And I definitely, so as far as, okay, so I'm seeing here, Gail, she has, of course, her home. So she's going to liquidate that and go through that with her. She's also has a long-term care insurance policy. My question to you is, first of all, how bad or how progressive do you think her dementia is, in your own opinion, on a scale from 1 to 10? Can you answer that? Do you think it's 10 being the worst?
Well, so that's in my opinion, it's too general of a question. And so is your mom able to do tasks like take a shower? Is your mom able to feed herself? Is your mom, is she just forgetting people's names? Well, that's assisted living.
That's
right?
assisted living,
So,
right? And the reason I asked that, is because memory care, depending on you got to really have her evaluated. That's my suggestion, is have her evaluated, and wherever you choose for her to go, then they're going to give you the feedback and say, okay, she can do fine in assisted living, or we're going to suggest memory care. But the cost part of it, depending on where you live, if you're in Arizona, she's got a home, she has the long-term care insurance policy, which, that will eventually run out depending on what her age is. If she's living in Arizona, Arizona has some really good communities that you can do private pay, and you can roll over to the Arizona long-term care system. I don't know what state you're in. If you are in Arizona, you're in good shape, because we have that program out here. And I would highly suggest that you find a community that has that program. So if and when she does outlive her money, and she might, then you can fall back on the Arizona long-term care system, which is Medicaid in Arizona.
Right.
Now,
it is everywhere. Yeah. And there's
Medicaid in every state, but it's different depending on if you're, for example, if you're in
covered.
Kansas and you go to Medicaid, you're forced to go to that old nursing home that everybody is so afraid of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, but Arizona, we have some of the best options here, and we're cutting edge to senior housing, and so they give a lot of options. So I think you're in pretty good shape.
So Gail, if you have further questions, please reach out to us, and we'll have a private conversation with you on things to look for and that type of thing, because it's very easy to spin out of control on this and to be, oh my gosh, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And by the way, the person with cognitive impairment is the first one to spin out of control. So they're worrying about things that aren't necessarily, I mean, like I said, my mom, 14 years, right? So we were on that journey for 14 years, and it was very up and down. The first 6, my dad was fine, with helping her. Then the next 4, he was still helping her. He was with her. So, does this person that your family member have any family support, in other words, a spouse or someone to be with, to live with in this apartment? And so Gail says, left her own devices, she's not great at eating. She can dress and walk. She has lost many words, struggles to answer questions. And we're in Oregon. Okay. So Gail, let's why don't we, sit down and have a chat with you and just kind of work through, because I think it's a great question. And I'm sure almost everybody here probably has it, is, how do we make this work? And being able to make it specific, because, part of it is age. Paige, you brought that up. How old is she? Because if she's like 85, then that's going to be a different story than my mom at 77, or, I hear a lot of early 70s, 72, 67 situations. And then now you do have to look, down the line a little bit further. So it's very unique. And this journey is very unique, both from a financial, emotional, and disease base. The condition itself is unique to everyone. So when we do these conversations, we always like to give you that caveat that what we're saying is applying to a general population, but your unique story and situation is something that we would have a private conversation with you. So yeah, 72.
Yeah. And I just by looking at this, and we could go off in a rabbit hole and we won't, but just by what you're indicating here, it to me sounds like she's headed towards memory care. She's going to need memory care. Yeah.
Well, and she will definitely down the line. She might get away. It depends. So it
all depends on the setting.
Yeah. And dementia versus memory loss, right? So dementia isn't memory loss. Memory loss is one of probably 20 different symptoms. So as long as she's able to get dressed and everything, that allows her to be in assisted living. If she starts to struggle with, staying in a room and not coming out and not eating and losing weight or gaining weight, or not knowing if she's eaten or not, then that's where you're going to have some of the needs more cueing, either from a caregiver at assisted living or move her into memory care. And yes, memory care is definitely, the numbers that I'm hearing from people, depending on what state you're in, maybe if you're lucky, you're at 7,500, but many of them go to 10,000 or more, especially post-COVID, because there's a higher demand for caregivers. And oh, by the way, 10,000 of us are turning 65 every day as baby boomers. We've got another 4 years of that. So, there's a big demand, right? And so that puts stress on the infrastructure, which then has to, result in cost increases. So, but we digress. But thank you, Gail. Really appreciate
thank you.
That was good.
I had a good question here. I've got a good question from Joanne. Do we take pets in communities? And yes, we do. So I answered that. So I wanted to make sure everyone.
Not all communities do.
Not all communities do. That's the general term. Yes, not all communities do, but we do. Yeah, and the majority rules independent living. Absolutely. Most of them all take pets. Assisted living, it's going to be probably about a 70-30, 70% probably do, 30% don't.
It comes down to capability. If
it totally
a caregiver is not, you are not paying for a caregiver to go walk your dog.
Right.
So unless you bring in a dog walking service and say, okay, I need you to come in and take care of my dog for me, that would have to be something, a conversation you'd have with your assisted living community. And I've even seen in memory care, the house dog and the house cat. So they actually bring in a dog or a cat to live in the community. And that's when the community actually, the staff actually does take care of the animal. So
Right.
lots, just a wide gamut of options. And this is the reason why we do these calls, is to help you realize that there isn't one answer. There isn't just one model. There are literally probably, 100 different options and variations of the type of services that you can get in independent living, assisted living, and memory care. So that's why we do what we do, right? Because a general answer is never going to be right. It's just going to be kind of a swag of what we know and what we hear.
Yeah. And memory care, that we do some memory cares do take pets as well. But again, it's based on the capability, and you're looking at a lot more additional costs because we're caring for not only your loved one, but now we're caring for a pet because they don't have a whole lot of the capability to handle that. But yeah, it's a lot of it's case by case, but these are good questions.
So Paige, one other one that I hear from adult children in particular, and I heard from my own father actually, is I'm too young to move into a place like that. It seems like there's this mentality or this mindset of you have to be really old. And
right. No.
An aside, and I think, you've heard this story where when we were going and visiting different communities with my brother and sister-in-law and my parents, we peeked into a dining room, and, the community was, in their 70s and 80s and some in their 90s. And Dad's like, this isn't going to work for me. And I said, why is that? And he's like, well, these are all old people. And I said, Dad, you're 88. When does that start for you?
Right. My grandmother, same thing. This was 20 years ago. We had moved her to our community in Kansas before I moved to Arizona. And she was 92. And she goes, I'm not going down to that dining room with all those old people. And I was like, we called her Bird. And I said, Bird, but you're 92. I know you don't feel it. And you definitely don't look like it, but they're in their 80s. You're one of the you're on the higher, you're much older than a lot of them here. So yeah, we just don't see ourselves.
Right. At that age. But why do you suppose there's that hesitance to move, to have that mentality of I need to be old enough in order to move in? What are your thoughts on that?
The hesitancy is again, it's about fear. I think a lot of it is they feel like they're not going to have any independence anymore.
Restricted, constrained.
Restrictions. Yeah. The restrictions are thinking, oh my gosh, somebody's coming into my life telling me what to do. And that is so far from the truth. And independent living, now you're going to get a little bit more restrictions, of course, and assisted. But again, you need help. You need assistance, but in independent living, I mean, you come and go. So I think it's the fear of the independence and we need to, try to educate families so they understand that you have as much independence and you can move out. You can move out whenever you want.
Yeah, it's a month-to-month type of thing. It's not a contract.
Right. You're not buying in. You're not buying into a huge, several $100,000 and you're stuck in this lease. Nothing like that at all. So you have the freedom to come and go. And we have people that come in, because we have snowbirds. And so we have people that come in and rent for us for 3 to 4 months, 6 months out of the year. And go back and forth. So go back to their home and then come out to Arizona to be with friends and family and rent from us on a 3 to 6 month lease, or not lease, but an agreement. So
right. And that totally makes sense. The other thing too is people need a reason to wake up in the morning. We all do. You need a purpose. And I think my parents thought, well, if we move into this place, which I think is the way my dad called it, referred to it, this place, then we're not going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. So like you said, the restraint, the constraints, you know, they're going to tell us when we can they're going to tell us when we can eat and when we can't. And I said, because food was very important to my dad. And so
Me too.
I said, so there's Dad, there's a bistro. It's open from, 10 in the morning until 4 o'clock. And then, to kind of fill the window of when people may skip breakfast and then go to lunch or not have breakfast or lunch. Like he didn't eat breakfast or lunch. He would only have dinner, but he'd get peckish. And instead of going for lunch, it would be like 1:30. And he would say, well, I want something and I can't. And I'm like, well, first of all, you have a refrigerator in your apartment. So if you want something and you've got cabinets with that hold food, if you're interested in that, or you can have somebody fix you something at the bistro downstairs. And so I kind of shot that down because I was like, Dad, you're creating issues that don't exist. And so when we talk about what wakes you up in the morning, if I had a travel group, so you mentioned Hawaii, being able to start your own travel group, like if there were a bunch of people who love to travel to Italy, I'd put up a sign-up sheet. Now, can you tell us how do you encourage your residents to start leading something like that? Or is that a conversation they have with the activity director to say, hey, I want to get a group of people together to go out to dinner theater?
Oh, absolutely. We have an ambassador club. And so there's a full orientation when they come in. We really do. I feel like we do an excellent job of really getting the full social biography of who this person is. So it's our job, and we're building relationships with these people. So, we're learning who they are, and we really get down to the nitty gritty on, what did they do in their life? What was their career? What are their hobbies? What did they used to love to do? And then we really team up our ambassador. We've got residents that, they're our spokespeople. They love to come and welcome in new people, and they help out with orientation and kind of pair them up with other residents. And then they meet with the active living director, and they just sit down and have powwows about, hey, let's do this, or why don't we do this? Or, we've got a gentleman that he still volunteers at Neighbors Who Care and drives their bus and drives and does Meals on Wheels in our community. That's about 8 miles from our community. He's still doing that. And then he's got other residents that are volunteering and also helping out in the community. We've got our Nifty Knitters Club. We've got our travel club, book club, chess club. I walked in our community the other day, and they're all in there playing. We've got some playing bridge, some playing cribbage, Scrabble. They're playing pool, having beer, wine. They're just having a great time.
Yeah.
So yeah, we really team them up together. And I'm super excited because in May, we're going to be having our panel discussion. We're going to have some guests for you, and they're going to be residents that live in an independent living community. So you're going to hear directly from them. So yeah, we really pair them up. And you'd be surprised at pulling some of these residents out that are you wouldn't think they'd be social at all. And they're very apprehensive and nervous. They're loving it. And they have little jobs to do. They have little purposes.
Right. And it gives them a full life. And I think, you and I spend so much time trying to educate people on the fact that this isn't like you're going to sit and play bingo and that's it. And so if you do go to a community and they don't have the type of lifestyle that we're talking about, you're in the wrong community.
Right.
There's only so much you can do to regulate what's available to you, and that's why we encourage you to first to bring in a placement agent who gets paid by the community, so you don't have to worry about paying for
or
that.
Utilize us. Pam and I can walk you through it.
We can, yeah. So I work with people all over the country, not as a placement agent, but I can make recommendations to, here's one that you should look at, or here's another one that you should look at. You don't have to do this on your own. That's the nice thing about, to me, a placement agent helps, but it's a matter of looking at the website, knowing what to look for, what questions to ask. And because, it does become a bit of a, let us show off our community, but you'll get a gut feel for what will work and what won't work. Okay, so we've rattled on. We have a few more
We've had some good
questions.
questions. We have a couple more.
Yep, I think so.
Good.
So what, for the people, we promised that we would answer or provide 2 questions that will make this easier for you to have a conversation with your loved one about making this move. So, Paige, I think I've got you down as, you know, what would you say is the question that they could ask to help their loved one rethink their mindset?
For your parents to rethink their mindset?
Well, yeah. Or, you know, yeah, I mean, it could be parents, it could be a spouse. Who do they talk with? How do they have that conversation to make it easier on them to get them to move?
I think we've talked about this. It's really kind of putting it back on us and saying, you know, mom or dad, here's what I'm thinking about doing in my life when I get to be, you know, when I turn 65, I'm going to start thinking about what I want to do in my future, and also think about, you know, utilize friends and peers and examples of people that are going through this, and say, you know what, Betty down the street, I saw her and I talked to her daughter, and she just moved into, you know, an assisted living, or went down to the independent living community, you know, 2 miles from us. And, you know, we should maybe go by and have lunch with her, you know, those types of things, and getting them engaged and validating, giving them examples, but also acknowledging and validating their feelings when they do talk about it. And because they're going to talk about their fears and their fear of the unknown. And I think if examples are huge, because then that way you're not feeling like you're parenting them. I can't stand that I'm parenting my parent, and they don't want to be parented. You know, they don't want to be told what to do.
Don't even say that phrase in front of them.
And I hear it all the time, and it's like,
Me too. I'm like,
your
no.
parents. Don't do that. So giving examples, and just be like, you know, I'm thinking about doing this and downsizing and going in, you know, maybe a small condo living or an apartment living when I'm 70 years old and still really active. And what do you think about that, Mom? What do you think about that, Dad? And see what you get from them. And you're going to get some resistance. I'm not going to lie. You are. But if you can, you know, kind of approach the situation in that way, it's going to be, it's not going to be as big of a blow to them. And it's going to be, you're asking them, not telling them.
Right. And, you know, being able to say, well, what does your life look like 10 years from now?
Right.
Whether it's to a spouse or to a parent, that's a general question. So my question, so that was Paige's question. My question is really about how do you keep it general? The number one thing that I hear from adult children is, because they've waited too long to start this conversation, I hear a lot of, you should, you need to, you really aren't capable anymore. And it's all of this negativity because they're scared, right? The person who's delivering the message is scared. And so they use words that are shut down conversation kind of phrases. You need to, you can't take care of yourself anymore. You know, look, you can't do this, you can't do that. And that's
taking away their independence right there.
Heartbreaking. Yeah. And you know what? They are not going to open the door the next time you show up.
No.
And then it's like, oh, well, mom's just being stubborn. It's like, no, you were a bit of a jerk. I mean, sorry, but you know, you have to approach this with a respectful stance that says, what are you thinking moving forward? I want to support you. So let's talk about, you know, what does it look like? And then odds are, you're right, Paige, they're going to start off with, I don't want this. I don't want you to put me in a home. I don't want you to do this. And it's like, okay, so let's just step back from that phrase. And you're saying you don't want me to do something to you. I don't plan to do anything to you, mom or dad or spouse. I'm asking you what you want
to do. Right.
And then let's talk about what you want to do, not what you don't want. because that's where you get that downward spiral and all those fears that they're not going to articulate the specific fear. They're just going to dump on you. And then everybody feels defeated and, oh, now we can't have that conversation anymore. We're afraid to, because then this happens. It's because of the way you teed up the conversation. So we have to take that responsibility and say, all right, before we have this conversation, I need to write down, how do I start it? What words do I use? I mean, this is my world, right? I'm all about words. You know, how do we position it so that all the family is on board? So nobody says, oh, I hear, you know, so-and-so's thinking of putting you in a home.
Oh.
Yeah, that's all it took, right?
Yep.
To close down the conversation. So that's really important. And then keep it short. You know, one of the things I hear about kids, it's like, well, we're going to sit down and talk with mom and dad. And it's like, how long are you planning on doing this? And it's like, oh, well, we thought, you know, probably take an hour or two. And it's
Like an intervention. No.
yeah, that's like, no, nobody did anything really bad here.
Right.
So it should be in casual conversation, or, you know, dropping little hints, not sitting down and having a conversation, because, you know, nobody wants to have those kind of conversations. It doesn't matter if it's aging or dating or marriage or whatever. Nobody wants to be sat down and talked to. And so it's really important to, you know, you could be having ice cream and say, you know, I was over visiting a friend of mine whose mom is at this independent living, and they have an ice cream machine. That was my mom's favorite feature of the first independent living that they went to, is that they had an ice cream machine. And, you know, she might have struggled with her words, but by God, she knew exactly where that ice cream machine was. She went down every day at 3 o'clock and had her call, and you can make it yourself, right? So she was practicing her skills as a Dairy Queen ice cream maker, cone maker, and that made her happy. And so just having those kind of conversations where you can relate what you're doing at this moment to how cool it would be. You know, what are you thinking of 10 years from now? Do you think you'll be on a golf course? Do you think you'll be traveling? Do you think you'll be doing this? You know, and many people, you know, there's a lot of people, 27% of the population is living alone right now, which is disturbing. Over the age of 60, I should say. So 27% of the population over 60 is living alone. And those people may not have relationships. They may think, you know, I'm never going to travel because I don't have anybody to travel with. This is where you start that conversation of, if you want to travel, certainly you can, and you don't have to worry about being alone, because you'd be in an environment where there would be other people with similar interests.
Yep.
So that would be my question. So
It is,
all right,
you are so right, Pam. It is literally all about the delivery, the setting, and in this circumstance, less is always more.
Yep, absolutely. Keep it short, keep it simple, and make it about what do they want, not what you think they need, because nobody needs anybody telling them what they think they need. So, all right, we're at the top of the hour. Our hour always goes by so quickly.
We'll have to ask. These are great questions. So, we'll have to add on some to the next one, I guess. So,
yep, absolutely. And then the next one is April 25th. Is that right? April 25th. Yep, April 25th.
April 25th. Yep.
Yep. And we're going to switch up the time, you guys, and let us know what you think. But we're going to do 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 p.m. Eastern on April 25th. And our topic is, you know, do you need support in helping your aging parents? Because it's not an easy thing. We've already kind of touched on some of the challenges. So what kind of support is out there? But also, how can here's some support tools that you can use without having to talk with anybody else. We're going to provide those types of ways of helping you feel supported as an adult child. So, and as a spouse as well, but we tend to target the adult children in that particular case. Okay?
Exactly. And we just enjoy having you, and everybody have a wonderful holiday weekend upcoming. And
for those of you who celebrate Easter, happy Easter.
For those of you that celebrate Easter, absolutely. Have a wonderful week, guys.
All right, you guys take care. Thank you for coming.